posting again from the Summer of Scripture National and Ecumenical Edition. For me and for many Christians and non-Christians, Genesis, especially the early chapters, are problematic because of the way that we've wanted to read them as science, as history, to insist on a 6-day creation as sort of the definitive, objective way that the world was created. Science and the Bible can look like they're in direct competition with each other. So I wanted to talk about that today, and about how we approach Genesis. And do we approach it as science and history and an objective fact that could be taught alongside archaeology and geology and evolution? I think there's two questions that it's trying to answer, which is, how did we get here, and who's in charge anyway? I think the Bible is always answering how did we get here in different ways, because who we are and where here is always changing. But the who's in charge anyway question is always answered, I think, with the same, and it's God. Even when we get to Revelation and we have these these dreamscapes, these apocalyptic and confusing stories of what's going to happen in the future, the answer to the question always is, but God is going to prevail. When good and evil fight, God is going to be stronger. In Genesis especially, here's one of the other sources that I'll be using during the Summer of Scripture. This is the Lutheran Study Bible, put out by Augsburg Fortress for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is my denomination. And this is the opening introduction to Genesis. For about 500 years since the Reformation, the question of who wrote Genesis has been seen to be more complex. Genesis is now understood to have been written and compiled over the course of more than 5 centuries, being completed shortly after the Babylonian exile, 587 to 538 BCE, when many of the Jewish people returned to their homeland of Judah and rebuilt Jerusalem and the temple. So Genesis then is the story of people in exile, coming out of exile, and trying to understand who are we, why are we here, how did we get here, and who's in charge anyway. This is another one of my favorites, HarperCollins Study Bible. I think Jonathan mentions it. Really fantastic book, and this is from the end of its introduction to Genesis. It is somewhat unfair to note the scientific inadequacies of Genesis, since it was not written to be a work of modern science. We need to learn to read Genesis as a book that speaks strongly to modern readers, but we need to read it on its terms, recognize its ancient voice, and not superimpose it on our own. It is a book of memories, of marvels and miracles, imperfect saints and holy sinners, a beneficent and often inscrutable God, and promises that bind the past to the present and the future. It tells us where we came from, not in the sense that the book is historically accurate, but in the sense that the book itself is our historical root. So that is how I'm coming at Genesis, that it is not meant to be a scientific or historically objective portrayal of how we got to be here, both on this earth and how the Hebrew people end up in Egypt and everything that happens in between. But it is a story of who are we and who's in charge anyway. And that's a story that I really want to know more about.